But first, let's talk about Ukraine, because Ukraine's armed forces are continuing a stunning advance, breaking Russia's military stranglehold in the east and recapturing large amounts of territory. Ukraine saying that its forces have recaptured a total of more than 1,100 square miles since launching its counteroffensive 2 weeks ago. In Kharkiv, Russian soldiers have retreated, leaving tanks and artillery behind. But overnight, Russia attacked critical infrastructure, knocking out power and leaving several cities, including Kharkiv, in total darkness. Joining me now, Ben Rhodes, the former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Obama, and retired Lieutenant General Steph Twitty, former Deputy Commander of U.S. European Command. General Twitty, this is an enormous victory for Ukraine. Is it a turning point, though, in the war, and how do we calibrate how Russia is going to respond? They've already acknowledged, for the first time, really, these setbacks. They didn't even acknowledge them after failing to take Kyiv in those opening days. This time, they have said publicly that this is a setback.
Well, it absolutely is a setback. And what I will tell you is, you ask if it's a turning point. We don't know yet. Remember, the Ukrainians have taken approximately 3,000 kilometers. Now they're going to have to figure out how they hold that terrain and keep the momentum, the current momentum that they have. So they've been successful on the ground and so forth. The U.S. weapons and the weapons that have been supplied by NATO, they have absolutely made a difference in this campaign, and that's why you're seeing what you're seeing now. The element of surprise, remember they telegraphed that they were going in the south, which they did, but they came back and they did element surprise there in the east. So that was absolutely critical and put the Russians on the hill. And then the last thing I will tell you, Andrea, we continue to see the will of the Ukrainian soldiers, the will of the Ukrainian politicians to fight this war. And they're all about fighting this war for their democratic principles and for their homeland. Whether Russian soldiers, they don't know why they're there. They're low morale, and they're just not willing to fight. And you're seeing also the Russians throw down their weapons and give up. So all this combined, great gains, but we're going to have to see where this takes us in the future.
And Ben, Moscow acknowledging the setback, Vladimir Putin, the attack that we've seen on the utilities, and refusing to give up Zaporizhzhia, which is in such critical danger, according to the IAEA. The State Department just saying that they're not going to speak for Ukraine about the advances, but that they are acknowledging that Ukraine has accomplished quite a bit on the ground in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly an extraordinary set of gains by Ukraine. And I think politically and geopolitically, Andrea, one of the reasons why this matters so much is Putin was trying to make a war of attrition work for himself, make some incremental gains in the Donbass region in southern Ukraine, consolidate that territory, kind of send a message of inevitability that he could hold more territory than the Ukrainians can take back, and then use that, combined with the pressure of cutting off some of these exports of gas into Europe, to weaken the will of NATO allies to continue to provide weapons to Ukraine, because Putin wanted them to value their energy costs above supporting Ukraine, and perhaps plant seeds of doubt in the Ukrainians themselves that an ongoing war that involves heavy casualties is worth fighting. That situation, that dynamic has been completely flipped in recent days. You now have a huge boost of morale to the Ukrainians. I think President Zelensky and his government can credibly turn to Europe and the U.S., but particularly Europe, where some support for the war was waning, and say, look, if you continue to provide us with these advanced weapons and, frankly, accelerate the provision of these advanced weapons, we can make real gains. We can win this war, but you have to stick with us. You can't allow Putin to fracture the alliance that has held together thus far. So I think it's obviously most important on the battlefield, but it's also hugely important politically for the dynamic that President Zelensky wants to carry forward in the months ahead. At the same time that you see a weakening of the will on the Russian side, that kind of collapse of morale of troops who don't know why they're there, who've not been treated particularly well, of Russian elites who stand to suffer. This could make the war of attrition work against Putin instead of working for him.
But by the same token, it also could make Ukraine more interested in escalating their demands, as they seem to be, as Zelensky seems to be, saying that they're not going to negotiate with Vladimir Putin in charge of Russia. And it could lead to Russia escalating using even worse weapons. Ben, is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think you already see Ukraine talking about retaking the Crimean Peninsula, and they've launched some attacks there. It does feel like their own ambitions are increasing. Part of that may be that they want to gain back as much territory as they can before there might be any diplomatic negotiation. You don't want to negotiate from a standpoint where Russia has claimed this territory in the south and additional territory in the east. But you point out the thing that I think worries me the most here, which is that, you know, a Russian autocrat losing a war, that tends to not end particularly well. This is an existential challenge potentially to Vladimir Putin. And if he feels like this is moving against him, and we're not there yet, this is just one offensive, but the risk of unconventional weapons being used, the risk of him being more reckless around something like a nuclear power plant, the risk of even more indiscriminate attacks on civilians, as we've already seen with the cutoff of power and water, that goes up. And so this is part of the very difficult and anxiety-ridden nature of this war, that Ukrainian success could invite more unconventional responses from Putin himself, because this is so existential to Putin's rule now. He's invested his entire credibility in what he's doing in Ukraine, and it's not working.
And General Twitty, just briefly, just how concerned is the U.S. military about that kind of escalation to other kind of unconventional weapons?
Yeah, I have to agree with Ben. You know, right now, Putin's not doing well at all. And so he has in his hip pockets, obviously, things such as chemical weapons, tactical nukes, and so forth. We don't know his risk tolerance there. And I know the U.S. military, Pentagon, they'll be watching this closely. But I think the president has made it clear we will respond in some way. And it probably won't be any type of military response, but we will respond in some way if those weapons come into play on the battlefield.
General Twitty, thank you so much. And Ben Rhodes, as to you also. As always, thanks.